basically. Like when he turned a certain age, he was helping pay bills. He was doing all these other things. So it was like, you forced to grow up.
Right.
And
Yeah.
do you ever encounter that?
Oh, absolutely. I think, when my parents divorced, I became like a surrogate father to my mother. And so, I kind of stepped into that role as many of us do, especially in the black community, right? Because there's no father in the household. So the next male, whether it's a son, a nephew, or whomever, I think by default, he takes on that position feeling that he has to, help out in the household, right? Because there's no man there. And subconsciously, the mom of whomever begins to depend on this young boy or young man to help out in the household because, quote unquote, he is, the male. So he represents the man. He represents the man that we need in this household. For the reasons why a lot of young males started selling dope at an early age. They weren't selling dope, you know what I'm saying, for their health and just because they wanted to. Many of them felt that I got to feed my family, and they took on this responsibility because there were no males there. So by default, I feel that I have to take on this role to sort of bring the household together by my ability to bring money in. And all it did was not only to destroy that young boy's childhood, but it also destroyed their perception of themselves.
Exactly. And then that's when, like I said, the anxiety, low self-esteem and things like that come into play. And that's just
Right.
that's a whole nother thing. So then another one that I thought was interesting, this says financial abuse. It says punishing a child for spending their own money, forbidden access, and stealing. Now with that one, I actually recall a situation where I was with some people and we was at their house and they had just got paid. And we was like 17, 16. And I remember the mom came in the room and she stuck a hand out like this and said, "Give me some of that check." And I was like, and he looking confused, like, really? And she, took almost all of it. And it was always like that. And I was just like, wow. But then parents will say, well, you living in my house, you paying some bills. And it's
Yep.
like, I get that, but it's like at that age, it's like it's different if I'm 26, I'm staying with my mom again. But I feel like at that age, it's kind of like, I don't know. But I
Yeah,
ain't
that's very toxic, man. It's very venomous too. You know what I'm saying? To have a kid or to make a kid feel like he owes you for your responsibility.
mm-hmm. Right, because they was born. We didn't choose to be here. You know what I mean? It just
Exactly. As I say, I didn't do that exercise for me to get here. So why am I why
why?
am I being punished? You know what I mean?
Right, why I gotta suffer for that? But
Exactly.
the obvious one, sexual abuse, we already know. Molestation, sexual exposure, threatened abuse if you do not comply with whatever they ask you to do sexually. I mean, that does happen. We don't want to talk
Yep.
about it, but it happens. And then
Happens
the
a lot.
last one, which we kind of touched on, but which I thought was interesting, it says spiritual abuse. So the child is taught
Yep.
people who don't comply with the parents' beliefs are seen as disobedient,
Yep.
rebellious, lacking faith. They're a demon or enemy of the family. Parent
Yep.
use their spiritual authority as justification for why the child should completely submit. It requires that the child completely adopts the parent's point of view. There is no room for differing opinions, question their authority, and that name calling will come, chastisement, even kicked out the house, silent treatment, all these
Right.
things. And so, although I'm a believer, I can understand why in this, people don't believe because they was all these things happen to them, and then they like,
Yep.
well, if that's God, I don't want it.
Right.
So
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly, man. And that goes on, man, more than you know, man. More than you know.
I believe it. So I know you have to be mentally and spiritually sound before you go into like any session. Do you pray before you go in any session?
Oh yeah, yeah. I pray before I go into sessions, man. Like it's it's essential for me to pray because I want God to be in the session, but also I need the peace to
Mm,
sort of calm my anxiety down, especially when you're meeting with a new client, because for the first time you're hearing their case and you're hearing what the presenting issue is and who's a part of this, and so I want to make sure that I can hear clearly, that I can conceptualize, that also I can scale on the proper format that is needed or modeled for this particular case. And so, I may listen to music. Like there's mornings where I may go into the session. I love listening to 90s hip hop. And so that sort of gets me prepared and kind of gets me calm because I want to create a very safe space, but also create just a space to where a person doesn't feel like I'm in a session and they just feel like, wow, this is just a space for me to just to vent or just to talk and then to get clarity. And then from that first session, we can begin to build rapport on how we're going to move forward.
Right. Yeah. I
Right.
like to hear that because it's just like, we need some type of relationship because like my other therapist, I had Candace a few weeks ago, she was saying every therapist is not for everybody. So that's why,
No, they're not. No, they're not.